am I a minister? Am I like a priest of the Quaker faith? What's that about? Right from the get-go, Quakers haven't really had ministers, haven't really had priests who have like a specific role in the same way as other denominations had. In fact, that's precisely what was one of the main reasons why they left the Church of England. They didn't like the role of the priest. They thought it was unbiblical. They thought it was going against the gospel that they thought that Jesus was preaching. They said that in the Bible. There's many extracts. I've mentioned it in my Bible quotes video. And there are lots of extracts in the Bible which states that the only thing that's needed in order to mediate with God is to listen in stillness. And so they said, well, if we can do that, then what's the need of a priest? They were also railing against it, obviously, because of the lack of equality and the hierarchy that priests, particularly in the Church of England and in other denominations, have, especially at that time. So that you'd have to go to a prestigious university, probably come from a certain social class, and to then get a wage where you just have to preach, and you might not actually necessarily be very godly yourself in order to have that position, nor might you have a very close relationship with God. Yet you are given that status, you are given that wealth, and Quakers railed about this. Quakers had a big thing about being against paid ministry. Liberal Quakers in the UK, for example, and conservative Quakers, and to some degree programmed meetings, depending on how programmed they are, still today do not have a designated minister or pastor. Now, this isn't the case for all Quakers. Some Quakers do have a designated pastor, but I would like to think in those sort of meetings, there's still time where the whole congregation could give ministry in that time in the service given to silence, though I don't know. In the tradition in the UK, the best that Quakers had that might be close to having a priest or a pastor would be that there were recognized ministers who weren't necessarily ministers, like as in that's your job title. They certainly weren't paid, but it was that there were people recognized in the meeting who were good at giving ministry. And I think that's probably still the case now. I can certainly think people in my meeting or meetings that I've been to where I'm like, yeah, they're very good at it. They're probably the ones that maybe might more likely give ministry, and it's of good quality as well. So we still have that. But there's no one leader in that regard. It obviously as well comes from the idea of the priesthood of all believers. This was a central tenet of the Reformation, the idea that basically just bringing down the priest from this kind of near mystical status in society to just, a regular person. And the Quakers just took it that one step further and just got rid of priests altogether. And to the extent, well, yes, if the priesthood of all believers means that anyone can give ministry, then everyone is a priest. Everyone is a minister. And so in that sense, yes, I suppose I am a minister. And certainly when I'm giving ministry as a minister, which is strangely not really a way that I've thought about it before until just now. It gives us maybe a sense of why we need to treat vocal ministry so carefully. I think we're often told, do not just say anything that comes into your head and stand up and say it. There's an advice in the Advices and Queries which goes something like, don't expect that vocal ministry don't expect it to not be for you, effectively. So don't expect not to give vocal ministry. But I think that the other case should be the case as well. Don't expect to always give vocal ministry. I think this is something that we need to treat very seriously. If we're giving ministry, we are putting on that role, if you like, of a minister. Not that it comes with any aggrandizing status or anything, but it's still something that needs to be treated very reverently. And so therefore what we say we need to make sure that it is a true leading, it is a true message. This is really hard to do when we're also told to do it extemporaneously, that we're not meant to prepare anything like priests or ministers in other denominations do, where they have maybe a whole week to come up with a homily or a sermon or whatever. We're meant to just do it on the fly, but we're not meant to do it on the fly. We're meant to be listening for messages which we then give. And so that's why it has to be so important as well, because we are putting on this role, I suppose, to the rest of the meeting. And so we have to make sure that we're giving it the gravity that I suppose it deserves. I think what is made maybe harder by not having a designated priest or designated minister is the responsibilities that priests and ministers have, and it's clearly laid out because you're the person in charge. It's very clear that these are your responsibilities, whereas when you don't have that central leader, then all the responsibilities of the minister need to be divvied out towards everyone else, and that can be difficult because then, especially as we don't believe that they should be paid to do that, then how does this all actually work, and how do you get people to do what they need to do when they have to volunteer to do it? And a role which is normally under one person in most denominations is kind of spread out amongst the meeting. So I think that is a hard side, and so I think that's maybe an advantage of maybe pastoral meetings amongst friends, where again they have that sort of central figure. Probably maybe another disadvantage of that might be also something that I know really wound up John Wilhelm Rowntree, my Quaker hero, is that friends aren't necessarily always well educated in the way of Quakers. And that could be just Quaker history, Quaker faith, and so therefore the ministry might not be as good as it could if Quakers were more engaged with their tradition. This was one of the main reasons why things like Woodbrook was set up as the educational wing of Quakers in Britain, in order to try and make sure that, okay, we're not saying that you need to have an education in order to be minister, to give ministry. We're not saying that the uneducated can't give ministry or anything like that. And I'm not saying that. But I think we need to understand what giving ministry is, and we need to have a tradition to fall back on, because otherwise, when we're giving extemporaneous ministry, what are we basing that on? It can just be our own experience, and that can just be fine. But especially when given extemporaneously, we do need something, and I think that's what that allows, because there is a way to give ministry, and this way isn't actually necessarily taught. I mean, I've done a video on it, but that's just through experience of being in a Quaker meeting and reading about Quakerism. This isn't something that, if you just went to a Quaker meeting and that was all your experience, you eventually, yes, would pick up the same things I've picked up. But if you're given a leading and you haven't been told how to do it, then that could be tricky as well. So I think there has to be some form of education as to how that's done, but I want that to be freely accessible, and I want that to be just something not to create any elitist standing in Quakerism, but just to make sure that everyone is more aware of their tradition. I've talked a lot about trying to revitalize Quakerism and to make it radical again and all that, and I think we can only do that if we know who we are and if we know what our tradition is. So yes, I am a minister, I suppose, as is anyone who enters a Quaker building. There are upsides to that, there are downsides to that. I think it is ultimately a great positive in Quakerism, but I think we need to be aware of the maybe potential dangers of that, and maybe put things in place and be proactive in that, so that we can be the best Quaker ministers we possibly can be.
Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.